They used to tell us to aim at the enemy. But the truth was, if you wanted to survive, you had to aim behind him. Show slow motion of tracer fire crossing the sky, B-17s flying in formation through clouds. That lesson cost us hundreds of lives before we learned it, and I still see them. Burning fortresses falling through the clouds, black smoke twisting against the blue. That I was only 19 when I first climbed into the tail turret of a B-17 flying Fortress Point 19, and already old inside. It was January 1944. That England was gray, wet, and tired. We were part of the 8th Air Force, the mighty 8th. Our base was near Thorpe Abbotts, in Norfolk. The air smelled of oil, mud, and fear. Every morning before dawn, we'd walk across the hard stand, helmets clanking, breath turning to fog. Engines warmed in the distance. Deep mechanical thunder. You could feel it in your chest before you heard it in your ears. Our squadron was the 100th Bomb Group, the Bloody Hundredth. We'd earned the nickname the hard way. By then, everyone knew the odds. 1 out of 3 crews never made it back from their first 25 missions. The Luftwaffe ruled the skies, and their 20mm cannons could turn a fortress into a funeral in seconds. Show quick cut, black and white footage of bombers lining up, crews climbing aboard, laughter masking dread. They told us the flying fortress could defend itself. 13 guns, 5 gunners for engines, a fortress of steel. But once you were up there, watching tracer fire slice through the sky, you realized something cruel. Steel burns too. I was the tail gunner on Misbehaven. We flew in the low squadron, the worst position. The Germans came for us first. We were slower, lower, easier to hit. And once one fortress went down, the others followed like dominoes. From the tail I could see everything, and everyone. I saw the sky turn into a graveyard more times than I can count. The first mission I flew was to Ostersleben, Germany. We were going after aircraft factories, Messerschmitt 109 production. The flak over the target was so thick it looked like you could walk on it. Black bursts everywhere, rocking the plane. The sound wasn't loud. It was more like the air itself tearing apart. Cut to footage of flak exploding around B-17 formations, camera shaking. My hands shook so hard I could barely hold the twin .50 calories. Then they came, the 109s. 30 of them, diving straight out of the sun. Our gunners opened up, a storm of tracers rushing to meet them. I fired where I thought they'd be. Directly at them. Missed every damn shot. Back on the ground, after the debrief, our gunnery officer said something that stuck with me. Stop aiming at them. They're moving too fast. Lead them. Aim behind the target. That's where he'll be when your bullet gets there. It didn't make sense at first. Everything in you wants to aim at what you see, not where it's going. But up there, at 25,000 feet, the sky isn't static. The bullets curve, the planes move, the air drags. What you see is already gone. That's when we began to understand the science behind survival. We learned about relative speed. A German fighter doing 400 miles an hour closing head-on with us at 200 meant the range closed by 600 miles an hour. At that speed, a second's hesitation meant death. So we trained obsessively. They built mock-up turrets on the ground and ran film reels of enemy fighters. We practiced tracking, leading, anticipating that they'd shout, "Don't follow him, predict him," show training footage, gunner aiming at film screen, tracers drawn in chalk. One instructor told us, a bullet from a .50 caliber takes about a second to travel 1,500 feet. So if a 109's flying across your nose, he'll be there, not here when your round arrives. We started painting lines on our gun sights, calibrating for deflection. 0.5 degrees, 10 degrees, depending on range and angle. It was part math, part instinct, and all survival. The first time it worked, I didn't even realize it. We were deep over Germany, and a 190 came in from the right. I swung the turret, fired slightly behind him, just as the instructor said. The tracers curved into his path, and suddenly his wings snapped, fuel pouring out like black rain. He spun away, a trail of smoke, marking his fall. For a second, I froze. Not from triumph, from shock that I had just killed someone I never even saw clearly. A tiny figure in a canopy. A heartbeat that would never beat again. That night, I didn't sleep. We were supposed to celebrate. One less to kill us, the boys said. But all I could see was that black trail sinking through the clouds. By spring 1944, the Luftwaffe was changing tactics. They started attacking from the rear quarter using rockets and heavy cannon shells. The Me-410s and FW-190s would stay at a distance, out of range of our guns, then blast us with 30 that we called them snipers of the sky. So we adapted again. Instead of waiting for them to get close, we learned to fire short bursts into where they would fire from, forcing them to break early. Every mission became a chess game played at 25,000 feet. Show formation shot, bombers under attack, tracer webs crisscrossing sky. Sometimes I wonder how much of our survival was skill and how much was luck. You could do everything right and still vanish in a burst of fire. Once, on a mission to Regensburg, our number 3 engine took a hit. Oil pressure dropping fast, we were over enemy territory. Flak below, fighters above. The pilot, Lieutenant Harper, shouted, "Feather 3, keep firing." I could see 3 fortresses burning ahead, parachutes opening. Tiny white petals against black smoke. We lost radio contact with 2 ships. Only static remained. Then, silence, the fighters were gone. Only the wind howled through bullet holes in the fuselage. We made it back with 2 engines. When we landed, ground crew counted over 300 holes in the fuselage. I remember touching one, small and clean through the metal skin, and thinking, that one could have been me. In the mess hall that night, one of the new gunners asked me, "How do you know where to shoot?" I said, "You don't. You just learn where not to." Show close-up of hands polishing gun barrels, quiet music under narration. He looked confused. I smiled. You aim behind the target, because by the time you pull the trigger, the war's already moved ahead of you. He laughed nervously, thinking I was joking. But I wasn't. We kept flying. Mission after mission, Berlin, Schweinfurt, Bremen. We grew thinner, quieter. Names disappeared from the morning roll call. Replacements came, young and eager, still believing the sky belonged to us. But we veterans knew better. The sky belonged to death, we just borrowed it for a few hours at a time. Show wide shot, dozens of bombers silhouetted against sunset. I learned more in that tail turret than I ever did in a classroom. Not about war, but about humanity, how fragile it is, how quickly courage turns into instinct and instinct into survival. By the summer of 1944, we changed everything. Our sights, our tactics, even our thinking. The gunners now aimed behind the target, and it worked. Luftwaffe losses doubled. We finally had the edge. But that edge was sharpened with blood. And for every fighter we brought down, another bomber burned in the sky. The war was shifting, the Allies were winning, but for us, in the air, nothing felt like victory. Only endurance. And I didn't know it yet, but the hardest mission of all was still waiting. It wasn't over. Not yet. We always joked that the air war wasn't about courage. It was about temperature at 25,000 feet. The world froze solid. Your breath turned to ice inside the oxygen mask. Your gloves stiffened. Your feet went numb before you even reached the target. The cockpit heaters never worked right. We'd stick our hands near the .50 cal barrels just to feel something that wasn't deathly cold. Show interior of B-17, frost on windows, crew wrapped in heavy gear. It's funny. When people see those old pictures of us smiling before missions, they think we were brave. But most of those smiles were just to hide the shaking. Not from fear, from cold. Our targets grew deeper into Germany. By February 1944, we were hitting Frankfurt, Leipzig, Augsburg, cities that seemed untouchable months earlier. The Luftwaffe was fighting harder than ever. They knew the sky was their last defense. I remember one mission over Leipzig. Flak started before we reached the initial point. Shells bursting black against the clouds. the whole sky flickering like lightning. Each burst was its own heartbeat. Boom, boom, boom. You couldn't see where they came from, only the black holes opening in the air. Then, the radio crackled. Bandits 11 o'clock high. The formation tightened. You could hear the sound of turrets moving, metal grinding against metal. Show aerial formation, flak bursts and contrails, radio chatter faint under narration. The first attack came from above. FW-190s, maybe 20 of them. They cut through the formation like knives through silk. Tracer fire everywhere, red, orange, white. When you're inside it, it doesn't look like light. It looks like anger. I swung the turret. Fired a short burst, watching the tracers bend in the slipstream. You don't think in those moments, you just act. One of the fighters exploded off our right wing. Just vanished. The rest kept coming. They didn't care about living, only hitting us before we hit them. Then I heard the call we all dreaded. Tails hit. Hydraulic pressure dropping. Oil sprayed over the fuselage, slick and black that I thought it was blood. Our waist gunner, Mac, crawled back with a patch kit, working under fire, hands trembling that we held the line. The plane shuddered, but somehow stayed in formation. When we landed that day, there were 43 holes in the tail section. The crew chief said, "You could have played a damn flute through it." We laughed. Because if we didn't laugh, we'd cry. That night, I wrote in my logbook, Leipzig, 5 hours. 1 kill. Too many ghosts. Show shot of airmen writing in small notebook, candle flickering, wind rattling metal walls. By spring, the 8th Air Force had new help, the P-51 Mustang. Long-range escorts. They could follow us all the way to Berlin and back. For the first time, the sky didn't belong entirely to the enemy. But with their arrival came a strange new feeling, hope. And hope can be dangerous up there. You start thinking maybe you'll live long enough to finish your missions, maybe even see home again. Then one engine catches fire and all that hope turns to smoke. Our 17th mission was Berlin. March 6, 1944, the day they called Big Week. More than 600 bombers went in from above. The world looked like a storm of metal bombers stretching horizon to horizon, each one a speck of silver light. The sky thundered with the sound of 4,000 engines. You felt invincible until the flak began. Show archival footage of Big Week, raids, endless formations under flak. They hit us before the bomb run. A direct hit near the nose. Our navigator was gone in an instant. Just a flash, and then nothing. The oxygen lines ruptured. The air turned. Thin, cold, dizzying. The bombardier dropped the load early, just to lighten us enough to turn back. Through the window I saw fortresses burning. Whole wings aflame, falling in slow motion, parachutes blossomed below, white against the gray clouds that I counted 7, then 6, then they vanished in the haze. When you've seen men falling through the sky like that, you stop believing in victory. You start believing in mercy that we barely made it to England. 2 engines dead. 1 leaking oil that we landed on the emergency strip at Debach, brakes gone, tires shredded. When the wheels touched ground, we didn't cheer. We just sat there. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. When the medics pulled the navigator's remains from the nose, I turned away. That I'd known him only a month, but it felt like losing a brother. That night, the chaplain came by. That he said, "God was with you up there." I remember looking at him and whispering, "Then why wasn't he with them?" He didn't answer. Why then? Our crew had been through too much to feel fear. We were past it. We became, Our jokes turned darker. Our prayers quieter. The only constant was the sound. The deep, rhythmic hum of 4 right cyclones starting up before dawn. That sound still lives in my bones. Show slow motion. Sunrise over airfield, crews boarding, engines roaring. One morning in April, a replacement gunner joined our crew. He was 18, fresh out of gunnery school. Face smooth, eyes too bright. He asked me, "Sir, Is it true we aim behind the target now? I smiled. Yeah, always behind. The sky moves faster than your bullets. He nodded like he understood. He didn't that we took off for Munich that day. He was in the top turret. We lost him before we reached the Alps. His turret took a direct hit. There wasn't even time to scream. I remember the smell of burned metal and hydraulic oil. The sound of the interphone crackling, voices calling his name. Nothing but static. War turns seconds into eternities. That second still hasn't ended for me. After Munich, I started seeing things differently. Not as missions, not as maps or targets, but as moments borrowed from death. Each flight was a gamble, and every survivor was in debt, a debt you could never repay. The officers would tell us, "You're fighting for freedom." Maybe they were right, but I wasn't fighting for flags or speeches. I was fighting for the man beside me. For Mac, for Harper, for every face that still breathed when the wheels touched home. By May. We'd completed 23 missions, 2 more, and we could go home. But the sky didn't care about quotas. On the 24th, orders came in: new target. Synthetic oil plants near Merseburg, deep inside Germany. The heaviest flak on record. We knew what that meant. Nobody said a word. We just climbed aboard, one by one, each step on the ladder echoing like a drumbeat. As we taxied down the runway, Harper looked back at me and said, "If we don't make it, make sure they remember we tried." The engines roared. The ground fell away. And once again, the frozen sky swallowed us whole. We called it the Black Heart of Germany, Merseburg. Even now, the name feels heavy in my mouth. Show map of Germany, camera zooming toward Merseburg. Overlay, Luna synthetic oil plant 1944. The Luna synthetic oil plant fed Hitler's war machine, thousands of tons of fuel every day. Our generals said if we cut off that lifeline, we'd end the war faster. But for those of us who had to fly there, it might as well have been suicide. The flak guns around Merseburg were legendary. Hundreds of 88s and 105s, the best the Reich still had. And waiting above them, the fighters, Messerschmitts, Focke-Wulfs, even jet-powered Me-262s. We knew the odds. We'd heard the stories. But orders were orders. The morning of the mission, the briefing room was silent. Even the coffee went untouched. Colonel Jensen pointed at the big red circle on the map. Merseburg, Priority 1. Gentlemen, this is the reason you're here. He didn't have to say the rest. We all knew what it meant. Show interior of briefing hut, anxious faces, cigarette smoke, the sound of rain outside. The takeoff was routine. As routine as war gets. Engines thundering, bombers lumbering into the gray dawn. The horizon already full of contrails from my tail turret. I watched the sky fill with silver wings, hundreds of fortresses, stretching into forever. There's beauty in that sight. Terrible beauty. We crossed the Rhine. Then the clouds began to darken. You could feel the tension building in the intercom. Men breathing heavier, short replies. Even the engines sounded cautious. T-1027. The flak began. First a few distant puffs, then an ocean of black explosions. The entire sky boiled with fire. It wasn't random. The Germans had calculated our altitude perfectly. Show B-17 formation engulfed in flak bursts, smoke and flashes everywhere. The first burst hit just below us. The plane lurched. A piece of shrapnel sliced through the fuselage, missing my leg by inches. Mac, the waist gunner, shouted, "Jesus, they've got our range." And then the fighters. They came in waves. Me-109s, FW-190s, even twin-engine 410s carrying 30mm cannon. They attacked from the sun, from above, from below. The sky turned into chaos, tracers weaving, engines screaming, men shouting. I swung the turret and did what I'd learned. Aimed behind the target, not at it, short bursts, controlled. Calculated point one fighter crossed my sights. A flash of gray and black crosses that I fired behind his tail that he flew straight into the stream, his wings snapping clean. Oft he spun down in silence, no explosion, no smoke. Just gone that I didn't cheer. There's no joy in killing, only relief. But for every fighter we hit, 3 more appeared. Then came the rockets, long streaks of fire slashing through the formation, bursting near our bomb bays. Point one ship ahead of us, Liberty Bell, took a direct hit. The nose erupted in flame, and then she disintegrated. No shoots, just fire, and then nothing. Show slow motion shot of bomber breaking apart midair. Narration quiet and flat. We held formation. That was the rule. Never break. Never leave the line. That it took everything in me not to scream into the radio. Turn back, for God's sake, turn back. But discipline kept us alive. Then our right inboard engine caught fire. Oil pressure gone. Flames licking along the cowling. Feather number 3, Harper yelled. Extinguisher now. We hit the switch, no effect. The fire kept growing. Jettison bombs. The bomb bay doors opened with a groan. 1,000 pounds of destruction dropped away into the clouds. For a second, the plane lifted lighter, freer. Then another shell hit us square in the belly. Everything went white. Show blinding flash, cut to static, muffled sounds of metal tearing. I came to with blood in my mouth. The interphone was dead, smoke filled the turret. Oxygen mask useless. My vision tunneled, shrinking to a pinpoint of light. Then I felt a hand. Mac pulling at me, shouting something. I couldn't hear. We were diving 20,000 feet and falling fast. I crawled forward through the fuselage, slipping on oil, the floor tilting steeply. The bombardier was gone. The nose, gone. Just open sky where it should have been. Harper was still fighting the controls, shouting, "Hold on, we're not done yet." Show inside cockpit, co-pilot trying to stabilize, instruments spinning wildly. We leveled out at 9,000 feet, barely in control. Point 2 engines dead. Point 1 on fire. The airspeed was dropping. Bail out, I shouted. He shook his head. Not yet. We're still over Germany. So we limped on, bleeding smoke, losing altitude, praying the fighters had other targets. They didn't. Point 2 190s dropped out of the sun. Closing fast, I swung the tail guns and fired, leading just enough to meet them mid-turn. Tracers connected. One fighter exploded, the other peeled away, trailing smoke. I don't remember feeling brave, I remember feeling empty. We crossed into friendly territory at treetop height. Engines coughing. Every alarm light glowed red. Fuel almost gone. Harper said softly, "If this crate makes it home, I'm buying her a medal." Show B-17 limping over countryside, smoke trailing behind, sunlight breaking through clouds. We crash-landed in a field near Brussels, NO landing gear. No power, just a long skid and the sound of tearing metal. When we stopped, the silence felt like a miracle. We'd lost 2 men. Our bombardier and the radio operator. Their names were later carved into the memorial wall back at Thorpe Abbott's. Every time I see their faces in my mind, I still whisper, "I'm sorry." After that mission, we were pulled from flight status for a month. They said we needed rest, but there's no rest from memory. At night, I'd wake up sweating, hearing engines, feeling the shake of the flak bursts, tasting the smoke. Mac would light a cigarette and say, "Hell of a show today." I'd nod. Neither of us believed it anymore. When we returned to flying, something had changed in all of us. We weren't boys anymore. We weren't heroes either. Just ghosts still breathing. Show airmen staring out of barracks window, distant bombers silhouetted in sky. They kept sending us back, because that's what war does. It keeps asking until there's nothing left to give, and we gave everything we had. That was my 24th mission. We had one left. One more flight before home. Harper gathered us that night and said quietly, "If we make it through this next one, we're done. No more. We go home." We nodded. But none of us said what we were really thinking. Sometimes the last mission isn't the hardest. It's the one you expect to survive. And that was our mistake. We took off before dawn. May 29th, 1944 to target. Kiel, the submarine yards, our 25th mission. The one that was supposed to send us home. Show airfield in early morning fog. Bombers warming up, engines growling low like thunder. The base chaplain gave us his usual blessing, "May God guide your hands." We nodded, pretending to believe him. But deep down, all of us knew. Up there, it wasn't God guiding anything. It was wind, metal, and luck. As I climbed into my turret, I touched the same spot on the fuselage I always did. A small dent near the right gun mount. Superstition, we all had our little rituals. Mac carried his lucky silver coin. Harper always wore the same scarf. Me? I just whispered the names of the men we'd lost. The air was clear that morning. Too cleared, no clouds. No cover. We knew that meant one thing. They'd see us coming from miles away, 20,000 feet. The sun hit the aluminum wings and turned them into mirrors, a formation of flying beacons, perfect targets. Show aerial shot of gleaming formation, sunlight flashing off metal. We formed up over the channel, and as England faded behind us, Harper's voice came through the intercom. "This is it, boys. I sharp. Let's go home the right way." I wanted to believe him. 2 hours later, the flak began. Kiel had more guns per square mile than any city in Germany. The harbor bristled with 88s, 105s, radar-guided searchlights. They knew we were coming. The first burst hit just off our left wing, close enough to feel. The pressure rattled my teeth. The second one took out the fortress above us, direct hit in the bomb bay. She folded in half and disappeared into black smoke. You don't scream in moments like that. You just go quiet. Then the fighters came. A swarm of dots rising from the coastline, like hornets from a nest. FW-190s, BF-109s, and one Me-262 jet, slicing through the formation like a ghost. I locked on to a 190 diving toward us from the high right. I remembered my training. Lead the target. Not the nose. That I fired a short burst just behind his flight line. The tracers curved perfectly, right into him. He rolled once, then vanished in a flash of smoke and fire. Mac shouted, "Nice shot, tail." But there was no joy left in it. We'd seen too many burn. Show dogfight over cloud cover, tracer fire cutting across formation. At the IP, the initial point, we opened bomb bay doors. Flak hit again. A shell exploded directly below us, ripping holes through the fuselage. The whole ship shuddered. The bombardier's voice cracked over the intercom, "Bombs away." I looked down, saw the load fall, the city below engulfed in smoke. Somewhere down there, people were running. Maybe families. Maybe soldiers that I didn't know anymore. Then, the hit. A sudden, violent impact. The tail jerked sideways, warning lights everywhere. I looked out my window. The left horizontal stabilizer was gone. The plane lurched hard left, spinning. Alarms howling. Someone shouted, "We're hit bad. Bail out." Show chaos inside bomber. Flames, smoke, alarm lights flashing red. I unbuckled, grabbed my chute, and crawled toward the hatch. Flames licked along the floor. I could hear Harper shouting orders. Calm, firm, steady, like always, but his voice was fading in static. Then, a blinding flash. Something slammed into me, and the world went black. I woke up falling. The sky was upside down, smoke and fire above me. What was left of misbehavin'. I reached for the ripcord. It didn't move. My fingers were numb, slick with blood. I tried again. Pulled with everything I had. The chute opened with a snap that nearly broke my back. Below me, fields, forests, a river winding like silver. The air was strangely quiet, no engines, no gunfire, just wind. Show POV shot of parachute descent, burning bombers in distance. I hit the ground hard, rolled through tall grass, and lay there gasping. My leg burned. Shrapnel. Maybe I didn't care that I was alive. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd made it back to Allied lines. Then I saw them. 3 soldiers, rifles slung, helmets with black crosses. Germans. One of them shouted that I tried to stand, but my leg gave out. They were young. No older than me. One pointed his rifle. The other just stared. That I raised my hands and said the only German I knew, Krieg vorbei? War over. He hesitated, then shook his head. Nein, nicht für dich. No, not for you. They took me to a truck, then to a small field camp. A medic looked at my leg, muttered something, and wrapped it tight. They weren't cruel, just cold. Efficient. That night, I lay on a wooden cot, staring at the canvas above me. I could hear distant guns. Our guns? The front wasn't far. A German guard sat nearby, cleaning his rifle. He looked at me and said softly, "Warm fleeks do? Why do you fly?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know any more. At dawn, they moved us out. A small convoy of prisoners. We passed through what was left of Kiel. The docks were still burning, ships half sunk in the harbor, cranes twisted, people digging through rubble. For the first time, I saw what our bombs really did. Not the black and white blur from 10,000 feet, but the smell, the smoke, the faces. That's when it hit me. We'd become what we were fighting. The destroyers. Show civilians. Among ruins, slow pan across wreckage. By the time we reached the POW camp, I'd stopped thinking about survival. It was all mechanical. Walk, breathe, eat, sleep. The camp was somewhere near Bremen, rows of wooden huts surrounded by barbed wire. Hundreds of us. American, British, even a few French. We slept on straw. Food was black bread and watery soup. Days bled into nights. The only sound that mattered was the distant rumble of Allied bombers overhead. Our own brothers. Flying where we once flew. Look up through the cracks in the roof, see the faint glow of flares, and whisper, "Keep aiming behind the target, boys." Show POWs in barracks, night sky glowing faintly with distant bombing. Months passed. Then, silenced. No more bombers, no more guns. One morning, the guards were gone. Just gone. We stepped outside and saw a column of jeeps coming down the road. White stars on their hoods. Americans. A soldier jumped down, grinning, and said, "You boys look like hell." We did. But hell was behind us now. When they flew us back to England, the sky looked different. Not threatening. Not deadly. Just endless. I stared out the transport window at the clouds below and thought, we used to rule the sky. Now, I just wanted to go home. Show sunrise over clouds, music swelling softly. That was the last time I ever flew in war, but the sky never left me. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can hear the engines starting, the guns charging, the calm voice of Harper over the intercom. I sharp, "Boys, let's go home." Only this time we did at least, our bodies did. Our hearts stayed somewhere up there between the clouds and the fire. The years after 1949 passed like a gray blur. Germany split in two, not just by barbed wire and politics, but by spirit. I in the East, slogans and fear replaced freedom. I in the West. Work became religion. Show aerial shot. Berlin divided by makeshift barriers, citizens walking between rubble and new construction. I lived in the western sector, in a city still scarred by fire but already buzzing with life again. Factories reopened, trains moved, and new shops appeared on streets that had once been piles of ash. People were hungry, not for food this time, but for purpose. And for many of us, That purpose was rebuilding what we had destroyed. By then, I was 30. I'd started working for a small engineering firm repairing farm equipment. A strange echo of my days in Iowa, at Our tools were old, our machines loud, our hands raw. But something inside me burned quietly, a determination to prove that we could build again, not for war, but for life. Show mechanic at workbench, faint smile. As machine hums to life, when I looked at the factory floor, rows of young men hammering, welding, shaping metal. I sometimes felt the same rhythm I'd heard in that American factory years before. The difference was the sound of our voices. Softer, humbler, grateful. For the first time since the war began, I felt proud again, not of uniform or rank, but of creation. Still, the past never truly left. It followed us, in the faces of widows, in the hollow eyes of those who returned from Siberia, in the silence that filled every dinner table when someone mentioned 1945. Show family eating in silence, faint ticking of a clock in background. We didn't speak of guilt. We built instead. It was easier to hammer steel than to confront memory. But at night, when the machines stopped and the air went still, the ghosts returned. The smell of burning oil mixed with the phantom scent of cordite. The sound of a passing train became the drone of bombers in my mind. Sometimes I woke up sweating, hearing voices calling names I no longer remembered. War doesn't end when peace is signed. It ends when the memories stop hurting. And for us, they never really did. In 1951, I received a letter from America. It was from Frank. He'd found my address through the Red Cross. He wrote about his family, the harvest, the new tractors rolling off the assembly lines. At the bottom, in simple handwriting, he wrote, "Do you remember what I said? You'd help rebuild. I hope you are." Show letter on wooden table, soft light from window, hand tracing the words. I read that line over and over again. It was as if he knew exactly what I needed to hear. Because that same week, our firm received a contract to supply machinery for the Marshall Plan reconstruction projects. We were rebuilding Europe with American aid, using American tools. And I, a former prisoner of war, was part of it. It felt like closing a circle I hadn't even known was open. The Marshall Plan changed. Everything money flowed in, roads and railways rose again, cities regained their shape. And with each year, the ruins disappeared, replaced by glass, steel, and hope. Show montage, cranes rising, smiling workers, children playing among new buildings, but hope came with a price. Memory faded. People stopped talking about the camps, the dead, the crimes. Let's move on, they said. The future is what matters. I wanted to believe that, but I couldn't forget, because I'd seen both worlds, the one that destroyed and the one that forgave. And I knew that forgetting was just another kind of danger. In 1954, I visited the cemetery where my brother was buried. The grave was simple, just a small cross among thousands, no medals, no honors, just silence. Show wind blowing through rows of identical graves. I knelt and whispered, "Would you have understood, Carl, that our defeat might have saved us?" For years, we had been told that honor meant obedience, that victory justified everything. But standing there among the dead, I realized real honor was surviving long enough to change. The dead had no more lessons to learn, but the living, we still could. That same summer, I was invited to a veterans meeting in Munich that I almost didn't go. But curiosity won. The hall was full of men in gray suits, their faces lined and tired. They spoke of old comrades, lost battles, and the futility of it all. But then one of them, an old Luftwaffe officer, stood and said, "We were good soldiers, but we served a lie. We must ensure our sons never do the same." Show close-up of veterans lowering heads in silence. No one applauded. But every man in that room felt the truth of it hung in the air like smoke, bitter, but cleansing. That night, I walked through the city alone. The streets were bright with neon, full of laughter and music. The new generation didn't remember rubble or hunger, and I hoped they never would. I often thought of America then, of the endless plains, the order, the optimism. They had shown us that